Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us and coming back to another episode of Declan's Autism Journey podcast. I have my favorite sister, Cathy, with me today. And today we're going to talk about answers to questions that I think are really prevalent out there. I get asked a lot of questions from either other moms, parents, friends, family, and about autism and having a child with nonverbal autism. And so I thought it would be really interesting for Cathy to ask me those questions, and I will answer with my experience related to Declan. I also think, too, that there's a lot of people that don't ask questions. And so for as many that do ask, I think there's probably hundreds that don't or are afraid or don't want to come across as ignorant. And I will just say that I love being asked questions, especially when it's coming from a place of education or wanting to do better, wanting to know more. I love that. That's how I have learned and gotten to where I am, is by asking questions. And so just thought this would be really interesting, a really interesting topic to cover. But I wanted to start with asking Cathy. Hi, Cathy.
Hi, Di.
What
Thanks
it was
for having
like.
me back.
Yes, thank you for coming back. I wanted to ask you first, what was it like this summer when we were together and Declan had the letterboard and could literally communicate with you?
Okay, so it was great. We got to see you guys in July, which was awesome. And it was the first time we've seen you since Declan's been using the RPM letterboard. And it was really, honestly, transformative. Like being able to see it in action, because actually the first time he and I actually communicated was I was driving home from work, I think last spring, and we were on the phone, and Declan was there, and I was like, hey, hi Dec, how's it going, and how was school? And you're like, hold on, I have his board here. And you started just saying what he was spelling, and honestly, I was like, oh my God, I'm talking to my nephew. Like, this is the first time that I'm really talking to him, and hearing his thoughts, and honestly, so between that and then getting to see it in person, to see how he, gets the letters and how, just how it all works between the two of you, was just really transformative. Like, I really felt like he was just, I mean, obviously he's a part of the family, but he was really a part of the
Yes.
family.
Like a contributing member. Like, that's what I always say.
Member of the family. Exactly. It's a perfect way to say it. And we could, what book do you want to read? Or, what are you excited for kindergarten? Things like that. Do you want to go swimming? Whatever it was really nice that, you weren't like projecting your own thoughts onto what he wanted. Like, I think he would want to go swimming, so let's go swimming. Like,
right.
He was really telling you or spelling it to you, which was amazing. And it's amazing to see. I think if nothing else, the fact that, I don't know, maybe because I'm a teacher, but I was just like, wow, he knows all those letters. He obviously knows all those sounds. He obviously knows how to build words. He knows what the words mean. Like, so the amount it taught me about him, I think, was the most astounding part for me, that I'm like, he's so bright. Not that I didn't think he wasn't. Of course, I thought he was bright anyhow, but just seeing the way, like, academically bright, like he could just spell words, he could communicate, and just on a level that was like, there was no hesitation. It was a really eye-opening experience to see him using the board. And I think it's great. All I could think of was, how can we make this more usable? Like, how can you make it, like, of course he's carrying boards around with him, but like, man, I'm like, we got to get him some kind of assistive technology. Like, we got to get this in his hands, because the boy knows what he has things to say. And
he has so much to say. I know
what he has to say.
And Cathy made all my letter boards. So I ordered one from Soma, and then it's hard plastic. Cathy was kind enough, I think you always
laminator.
Yes, thank you for the laminator. I think you always want to help. And I think sometimes when, with Declan, you don't know exactly how to help or how you can help and be a part. And that's like the perfect way to be a part. I was like, can I get 10 more boards? And you're like, yep, done.
I'll have them for you. I was like, that's definitely my wheelhouse. I'm like, yeah, it makes me feel like I'm helping a little bit and contributing and supporting you. Hopefully, you feel that too. So yeah, I mean, whatever I can do to help with any of it, let me know. So keep it
No,
coming.
I love it. And I loved when we were leaving and Aiden, I said it on my last episode, but Aiden spoke, everyone in your family spoke to Declan, not
Yes.
around Declan, not
Yep.
about Declan. You guys
Mhm.
spoke to Declan, and
Yep.
you always have, regardless of whether he had a mode to communicate back, which I just love. And I wish everyone would talk to him and treat him that way.
I know.
And I understand why people don't, but like everyone needs to get there. Like you talk to Declan.
Mhm.
But I loved as we were leaving and Aiden, was talking to him and then Declan responded. But it's also like learning to give Declan time. Like it takes time to spell thoughts, sentences out.
Yeah.
And so, you all just stood there waiting for him to finish his thought. And I just was like, that's so amazing because so many people like interject. And it's like, that's essentially interrupting him. Like you wouldn't interrupt two people that were verbally communicating.
Yeah.
And so I love that you guys just stood there and you waited and you heard all of his thoughts and you were so patient and so excited. I mean, and for him then to be like, it was exhilarating talking to Auntie Cathy. I was like, oh, amazing.
I know, it's sweet. And I know he was talking to Tim about like what kind of history he likes and what he's interested in. And I mean, I think that was really because Tim loves history, has a degree in it. So, it was nice to see him connecting with family members.
Yes.
So
Yes. And I loved that your Tim asked him, just a reminder, both of our husbands are named Tim. So I love that your Tim asked Declan something. Your Tim is a principal of a middle school. And so your Tim asked Declan something to the effect of like, what's one thing I should do with my special education teachers? Like, how can I support something like that?
yeah.
And Declan said, make them read, right? Ito and Autism Land.
Yes, he did.
And I was like, that is such great advice. And your Tim was like, okay, done. Like, thank you, Declan.
Yeah,
like
that's awesome.
it's like I love people that are just open to him and his abilities and to not only just open, but acknowledging and fully accepting that he's literally communicating. He just can't talk.
Yeah.
But it's him communicating.
There's been a lot of videos that you've shared, I think, on Instagram, like of other nonverbal autistic adults, like, or, they're like in their late teens. And I don't know. I mean, I've seen some of those clips that you've posted, and it really is eye-opening because they're literally just like, this is me. Like, I'm not going to talk. This is how I learn. This is how I communicate, and they couldn't communicate until they had some kind of assistive technology or the boards. And I mean, it's amazing to think that they're like, like, I think my first thought was, oh, he's in there. And we need to hear him. Like, we need to listen to him and just, because we already knew he was a wonderful little boy.
Yes.
We just need to, I want to hear all his knowledge. He can just drop the knowledge now.
I know. And, I have this handy book that I just love so much. I'm just going to plug it, Ito and Autism Land. But it honestly is really changed. I know. I actually, I need to reach out because I would love to take Declan to meet him. Yes. I mean, it just, we try to find people. I want him to know he's not alone. Mm-hmm. I want him. So we've started reading as we're doing our therapy every day, twice a day. And so this book, I've read it twice now, and I'm going to keep reading it because every time I pick out different things, and it is literally like a roadmap to your child, your nonverbal child. And so I said to Declan, tell me what resonates with you out of Ito, because I read it to him. I've read it to him the second time. And he goes, Mom, literally everything. He goes, everything resonates with me. And I just think, wow, it's amazing. And I want, Ito was kind of stuck until he was about 7, and then even longer until they really kind of honed his craft of spelling, and he met Soma. But he literally credits her with saving his life, from despair and depression, because he knew he was in there. He was just so trapped. Right. And experts would call him lazy because he wouldn't talk. They were like, he's just lazy. Yeah. And I mean, that's just so infuriating that these experts, that's what they actually think.
Oh my
And so is that Charlie?
Sorry. The UPS guy just knocked on the door and then left.
That's okay.
Hey, Charlie. Sorry, everyone. Charlie. It's fine.
It's okay. I have 45 subscribers. It's okay.
I saw the truck pull up and I thought, oh no. But usually they just drop and go. Today, of course, was the day.
Yeah, no
Charlie,
worries.
we got it. We're safe. We're safe, buddy. You did it.
Good job, Charlie. But so I use this like it's reinvigorated my fight. You know, he talks about education, the need for education, like all of these super important things that I wouldn't have recognized if I hadn't, with the help of Dr. Malillo, Nancy, our RPM specialist at Malillo's, I would have never known these things. Tim and I always fought for him because we always wanted more. Yeah. We just didn't know like what we were fighting for.
Right.
You were just like, we can't accept this. We have to do something, but we don't know what that is, or you know.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right. So anyway, in Autism Land, I suggest everyone pick it up. It is.
I'm actually going to listen to the audiobook version of it on the way to work.
Oh, I think that's perfect.
Long commute. I figured trying to pick up an actual book is like never.
I know, impossible.
Unfortunately, not right now with the life we lead. But I was like, I have an hour commute there and back to work, so I'm like, I can just. And I always listen to podcasts, so I was like, I'll just get some audiobooks in the mix, and that's definitely number one on my list.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Yeah, I think you're going to get a lot out of it, and you're more than anything, you're going to get such further insight into Declan, and I think you'll have an even better idea than how you can be part of his life. I mean, you're such a huge part. Obviously, you're right next to Tim and I, but like for him and you specifically connecting, I think you're just going to be like, I get it. I get it on such a different level.
Yeah.
All right. We went down a different path. All right. Do you want to?
Little banter to start. Now let's get to it.
Our questions.
So we do have some questions, and they're questions either from myself, so friends that you might have mentioned this already, friends that had questions about autism or specifically about Declan and your life. And we just thought it might be helpful for you to answer some of these questions so that if other family members or other people who listen to this might be thinking, oh, I think my son or daughter, might have autism, but I have no idea where to begin. This might be a helpful start.
Yeah. I love it.
All right. So we'll just jump right in. All right. So our first question would be specific to you and Declan. And what does a day in the life look like for Declan or for you or for both?
Little Declan does about 3 to 3.5 hours of therapy every day, broken up into a morning session and an afternoon session. And so he basically wakes up, goes right to breakfast, goes right to therapy, goes right to school, and spends about 6 hours at school. He's in a K-2 class. He's in it's not a gen ed class. It's really like it is a special ed class. Kids of all different varying abilities, different diagnoses, and spends his time there. And then he comes home, he eats a little snack. And then if I don't have any work meetings, we go right into round 2. And then we leave the house to get Cooper and Brendan, our other 2 kiddos. And then we come home, have some dinner, and then usually we swim or we'll go on a ride in the golf cart. He loves those 2 things, are huge activities for him. And one thing that we're really working hard on, and Ido talks a lot about in his book, but is stimming. And the fact that Ido used stims to kind of almost like escape his reality. And it was almost like a natural move into the stim world, he calls it, kind of like, and it was almost like he would say like a laser light show in his mind. And so Declan does flap quite a bit. He's, that's his real big stim. And so because of Ido, I'm learning that, there's these different thoughts of there's nothing wrong with stims. Oh, but then there is stuff wrong with stims if it interferes with development and being able to concentrate and things like this. And then from Ido's perspective, what I learned is his thought is that, going really deep into the stim world is a negative. Like it's hard to come out of it. It's hard to crawl out of it. He used it to pacify himself, which is there's nothing wrong with that. Like if he was feeling emotionally overwhelmed, things like that. But so what we're really trying to do is when we notice Deck is stimming more than usual, we throw him in the pool, we get him on the golf cart, we try to really pull him out of that and engage him. Whereas before we kind of just didn't know what to do. And so we usually just let him stim. And, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But when we see it going down into a really significant amount of time where he's spending his time doing that, we try to really pull him out of that. But so anyhow, that what I also do with Deck is I have like a little, you can actually see it back there in the corner. It's like a little handheld vibration machine. It's like a big pad. And at the end of the night before bed, I really try to put like at least 5 minutes of that on his left side of his body and go up and down and just spend time with, like, on his hands. That then goes to the right side of his brain and kind of like wakes it up a little bit. And so that's usually how we spend our time. And he jumps in the trampoline at night as we kind of sit around and watch TV. And then he goes to bed. And most nights, thank goodness, he stays in his own bed. I don't know how much he sleeps. I think that's still a challenge for him. It's gotten better, but it's still, I think the mind is constantly going. And the brain imbalance work that we're doing with Dr. M is obviously helping that. But, he's still not where I would love to see him from a sleep perspective. But he's got a very busy day.
Yes, he sounds like it. What time does he normally wake up in the morning? Or I
have to get him up usually by 7 if I want to get in therapy in the morning, like a full session. Sometimes I'll cut down the laser. Like now that he's moved up in a level on the laser, instead of hitting 9 sections of his brain, I hit 13, which at 5 minutes a section, it's an hour and 5 minutes alone just on the laser therapy, along with all the other stuff he's got on him. And so that's a lot. And so sometimes if we're running late, I've got to cut it down, or I'll do 3 minutes or 2 minutes a section, or 2 minutes on the left, 3 minutes on the right. Whatever we can squeeze in is better than nothing. But ideally, we aim for 5 minutes every section twice a day.
And these are all the therapies that you've learned from would you say this is the Melillo method?
Oh yeah, it's a huge part of it. Yeah. Like we start with primitive reflexes. We then do like smells. We go into smells. We do some core work. He really fights me on that. And actually, we're going to partner. We're looking at an inclusive gym that we found that's local in our town. And it was started by a mom of a child with special needs. And that child is now like the head trainer and master trainer. But they've opened it up and they're very open to children of all abilities. And so what we've also learned from Dr. M, but also my friend Ito corroborated it, is that physical exercise and physical strength is so important to the brain and body development and the brain-body connection. And Dr. M has always said that to us. I find it hard. Like Declan struggles in that area with me. Like he fights that. He fights sit-ups, he fights planks, he fights all of those things. And what I have found, because it's kind of in like the middle of the program, if I push him to do it, and he's fighting, it ruins everything else, right? And like we get off track. So what I have found is I kind of just skip over some of that. He does like a wheelbarrow, a loop around the house. And I am grateful for that. But I thought, okay, after reading Ito, and of course, after talking to Dr. M a lot about it, I thought we need to get him maybe like not a personal trainer. He doesn't need that, but he just needs classes where I'm not doing it. Yeah. And he's having fun. Yeah. And so we're hopefully next week.
You might listen better to someone who isn't mom, right? Sometimes. Yeah. Yes. That's my kids.
And I could use a break.
Yeah, you could use a break for sure. I mean, that is an awful lot of your day that you're dedicating to just the therapies alone. I mean, obviously you're a mom and you'll do whatever he needs. Right. But it definitely has to take up a lot of, is it 2 hours a day or more than that?
It's probably close to 3, if not 3.5.
Wow.
When I was prior to moving up with the laser, I was hitting 9 sections. So 45 minutes on the vibrating plate. And that was more manageable. Like going to 1 hour and 5 is a big difference. Just because of work and things like that. And other 2 kids, but we still try to do it. And at the bare minimum, we try to at least get in like even 2 or 3 minutes of each section.
Awesome. So similar, I guess it would be part of this, but what are some of the biggest challenges you face? I'm thinking even just having the time to maintain all of his therapies. But what would be some of the biggest challenges that you guys face, either yourself as a caregiver or your whole family?
I think there's a couple. One, financial. We're very fortunate to be able to even see Dr. Malillo. All of this stuff that we do for Declan is private pay. And I've actually think it's like similar to a wedding when you like add, oh, it's a wedding, like the cake goes up by like $500.
Yep.
Like if you add, oh, my child has a disability, oh, it goes up by like thousands of dollars. And so, and then you just start to feel like you're being taken advantage of, right? Like, and then I just like shut down. And certainly Dr. M is not that way. I mean, we are so 100% all on board with him. He is so transparent. He knows what he's talking about. We have seen the effects on Declan. I'm talking about other providers that make these promises and charge you hundreds or thousands of dollars, and they like actually have nothing to base it on, but you're just operating in fear. And so you're like, I'm doing it.
Right. Yeah. It's frustrating to think that, I mean, there's always people out there that some people are great and benevolent. And then there's other people that always try to take advantage of a marginalized community, whoever that might be. And it's difficult and frustrating. And like, thank goodness you guys are in that position. And I feel terribly for the people who, have a similar situation that you do, but don't have the financial means to do anything about it. I can't even imagine how challenging that has to be.
I know. And I think that's part of the podcast, because even Dr. M, like he went to Cuba and did this like study on kids there and, gave out the paintbrushes to like stimulate the primitive reflexes. So like there are other things to be done with his method. Yeah. It's not all about seeing him and being in person and having these intensive, like that is important and great if you could do it. But if you can't, there's still ways to start, on his method. But other challenges, I mean, Tim and I both have to work full time in order to pay for all of these things. It would be great if I didn't, but I do. But time is a challenge, but I'm very fortunate to work for the company I work for. They are so incredibly supportive of my, challenges with Declan and really support me in my endeavors to bring on all these different therapies and do all these different therapies with him. And I mean, I'm traveling here, there, and everywhere with him. And they still allow me to work, and they are still understanding that I might not be online for this period of time during a day, but I make it up, and they're amazing. But it doesn't take away from the fact that it adds stress to my plate to feel like I'm not, I never want to take advantage of their kindness to me. But so it just adds to the layers of stress in our lives. And then I think my other two kids feeling like Coop, not yet, the baby, not yet, he's 2, but Brendan for sure feeling like it's always about Declan. Declan gets all this time with mom. Even though he knows it's therapy and he knows it's not fun. He's 11. He can't like rationalize that.
Right.
And so I think that's challenging. But, and we always try to involve Brendan as much as we can, because I want him to see how hard Declan works and have an appreciation for all the gifts that Brendan has been given, because he's been given many gifts. They're all great, but I want him to appreciate those gifts.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm sure even like the perspective he has on the world is different just because he has a brother who, is on a different path. So it's interesting to see. He's such a mature kid too. Not that this is about Brendan, but he's lovely and wonderful too. And we love him very much.
He is. And sometimes he's amazing, right? Like he's a kid, but sometimes he's so great. And at the end of the day, I know he is Declan's protector just as much as Tim and I, even if he loses it on Tim and I, he protects Declan just as much as Tim and I, and he fights for Declan in his own way. Which I love, and I appreciate that. And I also don't want it to be like all consuming for him. Like I want him to not be worried about his brother. I want him to go out and have fun with his friends and do what 11-year-olds do,
Exactly.
But at the same time, I also want to be extra kind to his brother.
Don't we all want that?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Dreams.
I know. What would that look like?
So, all right. So switching gears a little bit, we had some other questions that we'll come back to you and your family, but just generally speaking about autism. And again, these might be questions you can answer. They may not. So feel free to share what you can. But in all your research, do you know, are there more cases of autism diagnosed today than in the past?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the number keeps growing and growing, and it's actually really scary. And that's why I'm always like, why are these experts, like developmental pediatricians, not like fighting and screaming about this? Because
Yeah.
the numbers are so staggering as how, where I think we're like down to 1 in 33. And I think when we started this with Declan, it was like 1 in 54. And so,
And that's
and it's
only in a
only,
couple of
and
years.
Dr. M is always like, it's going to be like 1 in 3. He's like, if we don't do something and we don't change things and we
Yeah.
don't address the problems and the challenges, it's going to be, it's already an epidemic. It's going to be even worse. And so, I don't know, like I get all antsy about like COVID. I get angry, like everyone like, stopped the world when COVID happened. And yet this epidemic of autism has been going on forever.
Yeah.
And they're still giving the recommendation of ABA as the treatment, which was the same recommendation 30 years ago. And I'm not saying there should be a vaccine for autism. I'm not saying that. I'm just
Yeah.
saying I wish that there was as much angst and energy put into
Funds
helping.
and
Yes, like
time. Yeah. I mean,
progression in autism. And it shouldn't be the mom and dad that have to fight for that and spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to do it. Like this is a real thing that's happening. You can't dispute it. Why are we not like speech therapists, OTs, doctors? Like no one's trained in autism specifically. Yeah. Like it's not a thing. And yet it's the most diagnosed issue in kids.
Right. Yeah. And we see more and more kids too. I mean, obviously in the public schools, with, somewhere on the spectrum. So it's very interesting, but I agree. You're seeing more and more kids, yet we're not seeing more and more supports. And you would think, and I'm sure there are some wonderful people out there like Dr. Malolo, who have dedicated their lives to this and researching it and doing the studies and doing it all the right way. And I'm sure he's not the only one out there doing that. But it just seems like we need more than a couple amazing doctors. We need research. They need funds. They need the government to be, looking into this. Like, is there anything environmental that's causing it? Who knows? There's so many more questions than answers, it seems right now, as far as like, that's such a loaded question. Like,
no, but it's true. I mean, even just, yes, accepting all of that stuff is so important, but like, I took Declan to the ER. I think he had croup when it was like 2:00 in the morning. And like, I always share he has nonverbal autism because I want them to know he's not going to maybe react or respond. So like, let's just put
the
it
way
out
they
there.
might think a quote unquote typical kid might respond. Yeah.
Exactly.
He's not speaking. We have to do something like.
Exactly. And I want them to understand. And this doctor almost was like almost like he had the play, and he like,
the doctor
was having a hard time. Like he was really having a hard time doctors are hard. He's come a long way since the Malolo method. So I'm very grateful. But before that, it was really hard. And, he would scream. He was so afraid. Yeah. And this doctor literally like walked backwards out of the room. And he was like, I'll just give you guys some space. And I was like, okay, like, great.
Gosh.
And he was like, oh, we don't have to run this test. And I was like, no, you do have to run the test. Like, whatever we were, he just wanted us gone. And I was like, this is so wrong. And yet,
again, the doctor in the room.
Even the guy who came in to do the x-ray was amazing. He's like, let's try it, Mom. We got this. Like, and he was encouraging me. And he was like, you got it, buddy. Like, meanwhile, like the doctor's like backpedaling out of the room. And I was like, I hate your guts. You know what I mean? But like,
you are not on the bus.
You are not on the bus. You'll never be on the bus. And that, unfortunately, though, is what we get more often than not as special needs parents. At least it's been my experience. Have I found amazing, wonderful providers? Yes, but they are few and far between. And they're just hard to find. And then I think I just kind of go in already like super guarded. Like I already know you don't want to treat my kid, like you don't want him here, whatever. And that's not a good way for me to be though either, right? Like I need to be open. I'm asking for people to be open to Declan. I need to be open.
Yeah, I mean, true, but I get you being protective because you don't want him to experience that again, so it's a fine line. Tough.
It's hard. Yeah.
But yeah, wow. That's a whole thing we could go down. I feel like that's a whole separate tangent.
I mean,
and to be clear, there are amazing doctors, nurses,
100%.
wonderful people out there willing to help and work with all kids.
And you know what, to your point, I want to share a really lovely story about at his pediatrician's office. I don't remember. It wasn't our normal pediatrician. Declan was having a hard time. He literally was laying on the floor crying. He was okay. He wasn't screaming. He wasn't kicking. He was just crying. He was upset. And she was like, I'm coming down there with you, pal. And like, she got right on the floor with him. She's like, we'll just do the exam from here. And she like literally laid next to him, put her stethoscope on his chest, like did everything she needed to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was like sobbing because I was like, oh my God, this woman is so kind. And I thought, because I was so ready for them to be like, ooh, let's just call it a day. I'll call in his prescription for him. Yeah. And backpedal.
Yeah. I'm leaving the room.
Yeah. Like,
but that's amazing. I mean, I know. And it makes me tear up too, just thinking like, she's like, let's do it. Let's get down on the floor and I can do it's just, it seems like a very easy answer and it's sadly not the easy.
It's so not. Except at Malilo's.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful.
He preps you for that. He's like, before we went, he was like, he's in fight or flight. He's literally afraid for his life because he hasn't walked through that fear paralysis yet. He's like, we're going to get him through it and we're just going to keep going. And they did. I mean, I talked in one of the episodes about standing outside the room while Tim took him in and oh my God, so awful. But I knew he wasn't being hurt. And you know what? That second session we came back, he was like a different kid. He cried a little bit and he sat on my lap, but there was no screaming. I mean, they came out of that room all sweating, like, it had been like a battle. And then we walk into the afternoon session and I remember Dr. Jesse being like, look at him. He's already doing great.
Yeah. Gotta get through the storm to see the rainbow. Isn't that the whole thing? Something on a piece of paper. All right. So continuing on, and this is a big question, but another question we got from a friend was, do you know what causes autism?
I think it's such a great question. And I wanted you to ask me this because, if you go to a pediatrician, developmental pediatrician, they will say the same thing. We don't know what causes autism. And what drew me to Dr. M when I found him on the podcast is like, he used the words root cause. And I was like, oh my God, I need this man in my life. Like he needs to treat Declan, because what I really started to realize with standard care is like, okay, you can tell me he has autism. You can't tell me why, but you are going to tell me how to treat it. That makes no sense. Like if you don't know what causes it, how are you going to how are you telling me what to treat it with? Right. Like that makes no sense. One and one don't equal two there. Yeah. And so when I found Dr. M on the podcast and he's used the words root cause, and, I sent it to you, obviously, Tim, everyone that I really cared about on Declan's bus, I sent it to was like, please listen to this. Let me know what you think. And literally every single person was like, this makes sense. Like everything he's saying just makes a lot of sense. And his belief is that there's a really huge, especially in these nonverbal kiddos, disconnection in the brain. So the left side to the right side, one is stronger, one is weaker. And in Declan's case, the feel and the belief is that he's got an incredibly strong, like genius level left brain, but his right side of his brain, the right hemisphere, was basically like not functioning. And, it's like bringing those back into sync, which is what we do with all the brain balance things that we're working on and
Yep.
all the different stimulation that we do for him and exercising his primitive reflexes, things like that. So, I mean, it was different than anything anyone had ever told me.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up taking Declan back to the developmental pediatrician just for a checkup because I thought I should, like, I thought I was supposed to. And
Yeah.
she basically was kind of like, in a nice way, but basically like, well, what are you doing here? I really just do medication management. And at this point, I had found Dr. M, but we hadn't seen him yet. And
Right.
so I started telling her about it. She was like, oh, so interesting. And she started writing it down. And I was like, wow, like this is so wrong, like so wrong that
It's
I
very
am telling
backwards that you're telling the doctor about
so backwards.
the
And you're a
therapy
specialist. Like you're my person that I'm supposed to go to.
for
So
answer.
basically all you do is diagnose and give out medication. Not my jam. I'm not into it.
Yeah.
So,
That's
but that's how it goes. Like, and again, part of the podcast, the origin of this was that I was like, I just wasted so much time and energy and hope. Like
yeah.
the hope is a huge thing for me. Like hope that I was going to get the right help for Declan
Mhm.
in all of these different providers. And it wasn't until I found Dr. Malillo that we literally were given hope. And we've seen huge strides in Declan.
Yeah. It's funny when you were talking about the imbalance in the brain and the right side and the left side. It was making me think of how my oldest son, how when he was little and he was
Yes.
diagnosed with amblyopia, and which is an eye disorder, but more so it just means, he, obviously he didn't have glasses when he was a baby or anything until he was about 3. And they just said that one of his eyes was basically atrophied.
Yeah.
And so we had a patch. It was we had always had a patch his right eye because
Yeah.
his left eye was so weak. And that was like the therapy. So it's just connecting with me now that, that's kind of the therapy. And that was, they gave us the problem. They gave and we didn't see any issues. He didn't display anything. He wasn't like walking into walls and stuff. But once he got like the vision tests when he was 3 going to preschool, and they were like, oh yeah, there's one eye he could see like 80%, one he could see 20, and then his depth perception was all off. And he was seeing double. So his brain shut off the use of one of his eyes just to make everything clear. So he could just at least see on one eye.
Right.
And then I do remember patching him that first day, kind of like the first therapy. We put a patch on the eye and he was almost like blind. Because he had just the patch on the one eye, but he was like, I can't see. And he was 3 and he's screaming. He's like, I can't see. And he's trying to rip it off his face. And we're trying to hold him down and just be like, it's okay. Like, you're going to be okay. Like, we just have to try this for just like 10 minutes. And like every day we worked up to doing it more. And then, he was able to fast forward. And I mean, obviously now he's 15, but when he was like 5 or 6, we stopped patching him because he had built up the muscle again in that eye. So it's just interesting how, it could be completely unrelated, but just similar as far as how you treat the issue.
Well, I know. And I think of Aiden all the time with that, like, cause it's similar concept. I agree. And even with Deck, when, his pediatrician diagnosed him with an astigmatism, and we took him to an eye doctor and they wanted to maybe put glasses on him. But this was when we were just starting down the path of he's not talking, like starting to recognize that he was having some challenges.
Yeah.
And luckily I work with a pediatric ophthalmologist. And so I called her and was like, hey, what do you think of this? Could you give me your opinion? And her opinion, and I'm so grateful for it. And I didn't know at the time how grateful I would be, but her opinion was, you know what? He has a lot going on. Sounds like he has a lot going on. Focus on that other stuff. If his vision is not causing him challenges and you're not like, he's not walking into things, you're not seeing that it's impairing him or impeding him in any way, just hold. Let him get through what and now when no astigmatism.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting. Wow.
And I mentioned it to Dr. M because at his last pediatricians, they did the eye check and they said, no astigmatism. So I mentioned it to Dr. M and I was like, do you think that's attributed to the program? And
Yeah.
he's like, most likely, he's like, think about it. We're bringing his brain into balance. He's like, you're doing so much work on him. He's like, it would make sense. He's like, astigmatisms don't just go away. And I
Right.
was like, you're right. So
Interesting. That is really interesting. Well, this is along the topic too, because we're talking a lot about different specialists and, um, you know, but what about the general pediatrician? You know, where does, I'm just thinking if I had a child that I might have concerns could be on the spectrum. You know, my first person I'd probably go to would be my kid's pediatrician. So I just didn't know, like, where does the general pediatrician fit into all this?
I think for us, I think if you're a parent that is able to articulate that you recognize challenges and you're already ready to fight, I
Mhm.
think, you know, you have a much not easier road, but a much quicker road to services. I wasn't there. And so, you know, and our pediatrician was more senior in his career
Okay.
and had the approach, which I often like actually. He had the approach of no big deal. Let's just see where it goes. You know, let's give him some time. And
Mhm.
I like any little nugget that a professional, an expert would give me to say that he was fine and was going to grow out of this, I just would hang on to. Like, and
Mhm.
so I was like, well, Dr. Graham said he's fine, you know, like I'm just going to go with that because I was living in my phase of like I can't even accept this. And I think in the beginning like I literally did think he just had a speech delay, you know, like I really was
Right.
thinking that.
It
And
makes sense. I mean, that's where I think we would go first.
right. And then coupled with Dr. Graham being like, yeah, he's a kid. He's little. He's a second. The older one's probably talking for him. Like, we'll see you back in 4 months, you know, whatever. And so it wasn't until like we just had to, like, I came to that conclusion on my own. Like, I started
I
to,
know you were a grunter. Mom said that all the time
mom did say, I
because
know.
you were the
So I'm like,
second.
he doesn't want to talk.
Well, it
Cool.
does make sense because that's the first thing that pops in. And mom would just be like, you'd be like, and I'd be like, she wants water, you know, or whatever. And mom would get it.
Exactly. Except Brendan was not talking for Declan because they're 6 years apart. So,
Right.
and he was in school,
It's
but
different. Yeah.
you
Oh,
know, but so I think for us, like, I think that pediatrician and where I was like a perfect storm for delay.
mhm.
And so, you know, I think every path is different, but that was ours. And then it, you know, you fill out those surveys and stuff like that at the pediatrician.
Yep.
And then it became point at, you know, let's okay, bring on speech, bring on OT. We still hadn't talked about the A word, you know, autism. It was more just like, all right, let's just see where he's at. Let's continue to evaluate. And then, you know, I realized pretty quickly, number one, I had to get there on my own. But number two, once I was there, they really didn't have things to give me, you know, but that doesn't take away from their role. You know, I appreciate them. I really do. He has since retired, so he was really senior in his career.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and the new pediatrician that we have, she's great. I mean, she's kind, she's gentle. Is she solving and helping? Like, is she like a really valued member of our team from an autism perspective? No, like she doesn't. She'll have a seat on his bus because she's
Mhm.
kind to him. She's
Yeah.
gentle. She's kind to me. She's
Yeah.
open. Um,
That's great.
you know, do I wish that they did
And I know
more?
she's not like an expert in that. I mean, I'm sure
Right,
because anytime, you know, you break an arm, they're like, oh, go see this guy. Like they're just kind of your
right,
go-to person to show you where to go next, you know, on your path, depending on
right,
what your issue is or concern. So
exactly. And
they do
I
play
get
a
that
different
now.
role. Yeah.
You know, I think in the beginning, you think like I thought they were going to guide, like they were literally going to be the shepherd that would guide us.
Yeah.
And you, when you realize they're not, and then you think it's developmental peds, then you realize they're not.
Hmm.
It's just like you're just backtracking, you know, and it feels, and you also feel like you're working under this really significant time constraint,
Hmm.
which just then leads to more fear and more anxiety. And
Hmm.
then you're making these decisions out of fear and you're spending all this money on things that, you know, if it came to me today, I'd be like, that's ridiculous. Like we
Yeah.
used to literally drive 45 minutes every Saturday for Declan to get a 2-minute chiropractic adjustment. But
Wow.
that's like But we were like, I have to do it. And
Yeah.
Tim, to his credit, knew it was crazy and was like,
He's
but he
always
was
the
like,
voice of reason.
he was like, let's just do it. Yes, let's do it. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
And, you know, and one of us would take him and one of us would stay with Brennan. We didn't have Coop at the time. But I mean, now I think back, I'm like, oh my God, what an idiot. You know what I mean? Like, what a moronic decision to make, because it's so stupid. Like, you just, when you look at it like that, you're operating not in a rational world.
Yeah. And you're living and learning, right? You've learned, and you when we know more, we do better. So, you know,
for sure.
What can you do? You were just working on getting him whatever help you could get him.
Yeah.
So obviously the pediatrician is still a good point person to kind of connect with if need be. But do you have any other advice on how families with ASD in their life, where they should start, or any books or other advice that you have for them? I mean, obviously we've mentioned Ito and Autism Land, just another good plug for nothing we get any money for, but you're welcome.
But I love him.
Yeah. So yeah, if there's any other advice you have for families, if someone's listening to this and just trying to get started, or looking for other places, like avenues to find.
I always say Disconnected Kids by Dr. Malillo is like that. Do you have it?
I'm looking for it on my shelf. I think I have it upstairs. It's on my nightstand.
I mean, that book, the podcast that I found him on, I think it's Autism Parenting Secrets. I found Dr. Malillo on that. Mm-hmm. Listening to that, I immediately bought the book. Tim got it on Audible, and then we were all in. So, I mean, that and Ito and Autism Land for nonverbal, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I also think there's a huge difference. And It actually makes me angry that they're the same diagnosis, because they are worlds apart. Like, a high-functioning person diagnosed with autism is so different than a nonverbal person with autism, non-speaker. And yet they're the same and have the same, recommendation for therapy and treatment. It's okay. But those two books.
That's a separate podcast.
Yeah, 100%. I can't even get on it right now. But yes, those are my two best recommendations. I think the other thing that I have found is listen, our path was not to follow the guidance of eight, right? Our path was to go outside. That's just my nature. Like, you've known me my whole life. Like, that's just my nature. And I don't judge anyone who follows and feels like their pediatrician, their developmental pediatrician, help them. That's great. I think my guidance is find what works for you as a parent. And, no one should be judging your journey. I'm not anyone to judge anyone else's journey. I don't want anyone judging mine. I share because it was so isolating and all those things. But my point of that is that I think when you go outside the norm and you've got other moms that haven't, you're just almost like on two different wavelengths. One is not right, one's not wrong. This is right for me, that's right for them. No judgment. But it's like I rolled into a special needs mom dinner one time, and I just found MERT therapy, and I was pregnant, and I was, going to conquer autism. And I walked into this dinner, and these moms just wanted to socialize and
not talk about MERT therapy.
They didn't want to talk about, and they were so lovely to me, and they were so kind. It was my first dinner, but I came in hot. I came in.
You're there to network. Yeah.
Yes, I'm thinking we're talking about autism and how we're gonna, how we're gonna kick its butt. I'm ready. And they just wanted to eat their tacos. And and I totally get that. Their kids, I had the youngest kid at the table. I was so fresh in my journey. They were tenured. They just wanted to get together and have a glass of wine.
Who's this noob? Look at all the energy.
Yes. But so I was I felt it. They were so kind to me, but I still felt that we were on different wavelengths. And I was okay, these are not my people.
Yep.
And then, which leads to isolation, more isolation. And then I found Dr. M, and I found the moms at his group. And, that's
immediately connected with them.
Immediately connected on every level. It's amazing. It is such an incredible support group. We're in a WhatsApp chat. I've never had WhatsApp. I was like, what's that? And so, but I'm in it and we chat, like, you know, everyone's posting ideas, suggestions, asking questions. And we're like, I love it. Like, we're all fighting for more and not
You just
okay
found
with
the right group of people.
yes.
There's some who just want to eat tacos and not talk about, want their time alone.
Yes.
Totally understandable.
Yep.
And then there's some who just want to like chomp at the bit to be like, how can we do more? What can we do next?
Yes.
And that's more your group.
It's more my jam.
I think as being an observer over these years and talking with you over the different therapies and things, I think you just listen to your gut too. You really, you'd be like, well, we're trying this, but you might have had reservations about something, but obviously willing to try whatever to help Declan. So,
Right.
That's the end goal. So you'd give it a go, but if you didn't stick with you until you found something else and you're like, no, this seems more. And like now with Dr. Malello, it does seem like, no, like I remember you were like, I found my people. Like these are the people who are just as motivated as me, just as, on board with all of this and trying to, just think outside the box.
Yes. And like, I can't tell you how, like, the crazy looks I get. So I actually temper my autism mom face, like, or vocabulary, whatever we want to call it, when I'm out and not in the Malillo group or with you or with people I feel really, really safe with and that really support Declan. Because I can't tell you the crazy looks I have gotten. If I said Declan is literally a genius, like he's genius on one side, like I get the like, oh, poor mommy, she hasn't accepted this, like I feel bad for her. And that's like the bulk of what you get outside. And that's why with the Malillo moms, and of course I feel like I can say that stuff and everyone's like, absolutely. Of course he's a genius, like you've got to just keep going.
Those two things can exist in the same plane. Like he can be nonverbal, autistic, and he can be a genius.
Yeah.
Those two things can coexist. Like, I think that's
but most people don't think that.
Most people don't think that. And that is its own separate podcast. We're coming up with all kinds of podcast ideas. But it's so true. And I feel like, and maybe they just haven't experienced enough kids personally in this, like, who are nonverbal, to really see that how it would work. I mean, I would do the same thing. Aiden obviously is not on the spectrum, but he's a very, very bright kid, high IQ. And we only took him in first grade to a psychologist for IQ testing, only so we'd have a piece of paper that showed his IQ level, so that when we went to parent conferences, because he was already reading in like a middle school level in first grade and drawing full scale maps.
I know, he's amazing.
World. Yeah, the whole thing, right? Like with like estuaries and rivers and whatever, like stuff I didn't even know. And it was even challenging for us, and he could speak, and they still would be like, he'd just like cite off all these facts and things, and they'd still be like, oh, that's cute. Your parents make you memorize that, and you're just like, no, I don't even know those things. Like, children can be smarter than some adults. It is absolutely possible.
I know. And I love when Dr. M, and I just won't ever forget it. Like and I say it all the time. He sat across from Tim and I, and he was like, I guarantee you, he's smarter than the three of us combined. And I mean, that man is a genius. So, like, I just remember looking at Tim and starting to cry and being like, because we had just been told so the opposite. And for him to sit there and truly speak from his heart, and that he believed that, he knew it. He didn't even believe, he knew it. Yeah. And it's like, wow, like that's mind blowing, but it sets you on a path of your own journey of like really important to find those people so you don't feel alone in your journey. But I think it just also depends on where your kid is and where you are at in your parental journey. Like everybody's on a different, it reminds me of like the NICU when Coop was there, and like, you never knew what level the poor kid in the next bed was. So like, you didn't really want to engage with the parent. You were already emotionally drained yourself. Yeah. Even if I knew Coop was going to be fine. I just knew he needed a little breathing and eating support, and he was going to be fine. But like, it still was so heavy. And so like, as you're, scrubbing up every day to go see him, and the mom's standing next to you, see each other every day for the whole day, you just say hi, and that's it, because you're just so emotionally bogged down yourself that like you can't even take on anyone else's problems or hardships,
I get that. I totally get that. Well, I feel like I've asked you a lot of questions, but there is one more I just want to ask, just to kind of end this way. But so how would you say autism has impacted your life in a positive way?
I love that question. I think now I can answer that, like where we are at now. I think I probably couldn't have answered that a year and a half ago before finding Dr. M. I really probably couldn't have answered that. Like I probably couldn't have seen the positivity that it's brought, but now I certainly do. I mean, it's brought so much into our lives that we would have never been privy to before. I think it's made us more patient. I think it's made us more open and accepting. I mean, I like to think that I am an open and accepting person, but Declan has brought us to a whole nother level. I like to think that I'm a person that fights for injustice more so even than before. And, I just think I look at him and all we want is our kids to be safe and independent. All of our kids, right? Safe, independent, happy. Those are the three things I want all of my kids to be. And I look at Declan and I always thought, I have no idea if he's going to be those three things. And I think now, like, I know he will be those three things. He's always going to be unique and he's always going to be different. But I love that. Like, I always say to Brendan, like, be a leader, don't be a follower, Yes. And I feel like Declan, even at 5, is kind of being his own leader. And I think he's teaching a lot of people, including Tim and I, about really unconditional love, kindness, how important it is to just be together, and really focusing on those really important things. I think losing mom and dad also helped shape that
part
stuff.
Of that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like we were already kind of moving in that direction after losing them. So it's,
well, that just kind of brought us, I think, back down to like what is truly important in life. And it's family, it's being together, it's general happiness, kindness, things like just the real general stuff, simple things is what you kind of foundational things. That's what you really need. I think for myself, and I'm answering my question that I asked, but I asked it so well. So no, I'm thinking, I like how this is brought like this is our normalcy, that autism is just part of our normalcy. And there's like, I like that. I like that my kids, like Neve does not see it as anything like different or bad,
I know.
It says, yeah, my cousin Declan, he's got autism. Like,
I love it.
He doesn't speak. Like, and that's just like matter of fact.
Right.
And it's just like, like no one's ever challenged her on it, obviously, but because they had that week they celebrated it last spring, neurodiversity, and she wore her "Someone I Love Has Autism" t-shirt, and she was so proud to wear it and tell people about her cousin Declan, and it was very sweet. And I love that she wouldn't have that without Declan, I mean, she may be much more like, oh, what's wrong with that child, or something, because she doesn't have the knowledge, or wouldn't have had the knowledge without having Declan in our family.
Yes.
And though each one of these 6 kids in our little group is all their own special little person, the awareness of neurodiversity and just the acceptance, I think, is just huge there. And I think even if the older kids maybe don't say it or talk about it as much, I think it's just always there. And
I agree. I mean, and from your kids, I can see it in just how they interact with him. Like, I just see it. I feel
they're not like that ER doctor. Like, they're not cuddling out of a room. They're just like, hey,
doing the Michael Jackson moonwalk out of the room, like, dude, I see you. I'm looking at you. I'm going to kick your butt in the hallway when I see you.
Exactly.
But that makes me think of like the pizza guy from New York. I shared that story about how I shared with him, like we had this connection to Dr. M, whatever. And so you were like, Yeah. Update on the
I feel like
pizza
we
guy.
need our own jingle for that. Like, what's update?
You were like, you need to share this with him because it's so special. It was probably nothing to him, just to be kind. Like, he didn't even think about it. And you were like, you need to share that with him. So when I went back, I actually think I was there with Cooper, and we went to get our pizza. And I said, of course, he was like, hey, how's it going? He recognized me. And I was like, I just have to tell you, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you're on my podcast. And so he was like, text it to me. So I texted to him, and I was like, 24 minutes in, whatever.
Yeah.
He texts me back, and he's like, that is the sweetest thing. He goes, you just touched my heart so much. He's like, I'm literally crying. And I know, the pizza guy. And so then trying to think, and I was like, well, thank you. It really did mean a lot, whatever. Then I go back July with Declan, and we saw him again, of course, every day. And he's like, hey, whatever. And he's like, he goes, I sent that to all my friends and family. And I was like, yes, the pizza guy always is. I was like, well, you always have a seat on his bus. You're amazing.
Yeah, and you got to plug the shop.
It's on my Instagram. Like, I always tag it when I go to Dr. M, because but it goes back to like this little thing of I shared, and then he responded amazingly. But then even when we were at the clinic, Dr. Ty, who is Dr. Malillo's son, we always treat with Dr. Jesse, but Dr. Ty and Dr. Jesse are there too. And Dr. Ty has helped us with Coop, and he's awesome. But he was sitting down just chatting with Tim and I, and he's like, okay, he goes, not you guys, but Declan is like a local celebrity. He goes, I went into the pizza shop, and he's like, the guy was like, do you know Declan? And he's like, yeah, I know Declan. Like, yeah, I know Declan. And I was like, oh my, he's used to people being like, my dad is like this world renowned, but so he's like, he's a celebrity. He's a local celebrity. We were like, awesome. But that speaks to Declan. And I just think like that is one of the huge positives to come out of this. And I think just even doing this podcast, like, it's so outside of my comfort zone, but I know that it's so important, and I want to do my part. And I always said that to Dr. M, like, not a neurologist. I don't know what my part is, but I want to do my part because we have done so much and we have learned so much. And if I can share it and that helps one or two people, then great. Even though, like, it's just not my jam. Although I love that you're on here with me. It's way more fun.
This is fun. I'm enjoying it. And we get to see each other and connect, which we don't.
I know.
You in South Carolina, me in Massachusetts. So
I know.
We're here to see each other. So this is another bonus.
I love it. All right, let's do another one.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining my lovely sister and I. This was so much fun. I hope everyone enjoys this episode as much as we had talking about it, I feel like.
Definitely.
And we'll see you soon. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.